Well, welcome back to Talking Art in Maine. Boy, does it feel good to be back. And thank you all for coming. I want to start by saying thank you to Andrew. Because Andrew, all last year, has been making this place safe so we could come back. And it's not only surviving, it's thriving. So I think we should give him a big hand. And I hope you and your families have emerged from the past year in good health, both psychologically and emotionally. And for those of you who have experienced loss, my heartfelt sympathy, and I know this community is the most loving community if you just reach out. I've been through it myself, and it's a wonderful, loving community. Well, tonight is my great pleasure to welcome Jeffery Becton to Talking Art in Maine. First one since COVID. Jeffery is a pioneer in the field of photo-based art. Using the world of digital tools, he creates images that look like alternative realities, rich with symbolism. He calls them digital montages. While working on his MFA in graphic design at the Yale School of Art in 1976, he became fascinated by the computer. And for his thesis, he produced a boxed portfolio of psychologically arresting black and white portraits. His aim was to initiate an emotional response from the viewer. After graduation, and by the way, we sent out you all have a copy of his bio, so I'm not going to go into detail about that, but I just want to mention a few more things. After graduation, he decided to give up the idea of living in New York City as a graphic designer and moved to Deer Isle, Maine, where he had summered with his family, and where he could immerse himself in the land and sea and coastal architecture that inspires him. He made the decision to become a fine art photographer. He began to use his camera as his sketchbook. The photographic world was changing very fast, and in 1990, his introduction to Photoshop changed his life. For 40 plus years, he has been creating highly individualistic imagery by layering photographs, paintings, and diverse elements, resulting in an emotional reaction to the world he inhabits. We want to believe what we see in his digital montages, but look closely. The composite images are beautiful, but unsettling, sometimes frightening. They are dreamlike, and as we look at them, they bring out our own emotional responses. Jeffery Becton, welcome to Talking Art in Maine. Jeffery, I'd love to start by asking you what made you jump into Photoshop and the new digital tools for fine art when nobody in the art world was using them. In fact, they were quite critical of them.
That's true. I had a I had a 3-year-old daughter at the time that I was presented with an opportunity to take Photoshop, which I hadn't ever used and didn't have a copy of and had never really thought about very much, to try to, shall we say, restore a failed attempt at the WERU, the public radio station, the community radio station in Blue Hill. It was their 3rd anniversary, and they had a 3rd anniversary program guide concept, which was going to be 3 3-year-olds sitting around a cake with 3 candles on it and holding up 3 fingers. And my daughter didn't get the message, I guess, that she was supposed to enjoy this. And it was a cold March day, I remember that. And things didn't go well. The cake was brown with WERU and chocolate morsels, so you couldn't really tell what it was, and the candles were about that big, and the kids were really unhappy, and my daughter especially. And no matter how many photographs the photographer the hapless photographer who had this assignment, my daughter wouldn't let go of her mother's hand. She was trying to sit outside the picture. Anyway, I said to the art director that I asked her how she was going to salvage this, and she said she didn't know. And I said, well, you could always Photoshop everything and make it look like a very happy birthday party and everybody's having a wonderful time. And she said, do you know how to use Photoshop? And I said, I have no idea. I said, but it sounds like a good concept. And she said, well, she worked for Wooden Boat magazine. She was their art director, Sherry Streeter. And she said, the magazine has a copy of Photoshop, and I would be willing to loan you the copy. I can't loan you the manual because that can't leave the premises, but I'd be happy to loan you the program and see what you can, and a scan of what we think is the best shot that they got. And I said I would try it. And it turned out to be a very enjoyable experience for me because it was the program was easy to use and very intuitive. It all fit back in those days on one floppy disk, an 800K floppy disk. But anybody who's downloaded photograph in the last 10 years knows that it's gigabytes worth of information. But anyway, so what I was able to do, I'll try to tell us as quickly as I can, but only one child was smiling of the three, and only one was holding up any fingers, and that was 2 fingers. So, and of course my daughter's arm is out to the side. And so I just took what she gave me and just tried to turn it into something that looked like a happy birthday party. So I took the one smile and I put it on the other 2 children, and I tried to make it, fudge it a little bit so it didn't look exactly the same. And then I gathered up the fingers that were available and put them on everybody's hands, And then there was the problem of the cake, so I just made 3 bigger candles and put those on the cake, and vanilla chocolate drops that were bigger that say WERU, and in the end, it was actually a kind of a charming picture of. Also party hats. I had to invent the party hats. There were no party hats, so I drew them as best I could using the drawing tools in Photoshop, and I was happy with it, and I thought that they were going to be happy with it. And so when I finally talked to the art director again a few weeks later, I said, how did that come off? Did it come off okay? And she said, yes, it came off for the most part okay. She said the problem was with the parents of those children who took exception to what their mouths looked like. And what their fingers looked like. Pardon me. And I said, and that was all? That's all the pushback you got? And she said, Yep, that's all.
So actually, did that really start you thinking that you were
really.
going to? That
That's
is
the
an
first
amazing
time I ever
story.
used Photoshop, and
I love it. That is a great
and
story.
I wasn't it wasn't an intimidating experience. It was really fun, actually. And,
Well, I have a quote that you said about using Photoshop. I could be more creative, and now that I know the story, it's funny. I could be more creative in a far more immediate, intuitive way than I could ever be in a dark room, which means you had a lot more things you could do.
Right. It was a long process of beginning to understand. Well, back up a little bit. What I thought I was going to use Photoshop for after that experience with WERU, because I was just kind of pumped to go try something else. What I thought I was going to use it for was to correct what I saw as defects or deficiencies in my black and white work. Things that pictures, that didn't quite rise to the right level. So I started working that way, using prints and stitching them together, and then it wasn't too long before I could scan negatives and use the negatives to stitch together. I got tired, I guess, is what I would say. I got bored very quickly with trying to make my black and white work look better. And it wasn't that, that I wasn't as in love with my black and white work as artists are with their creations, but it wasn't as interesting or exciting, compelling to try to do that as I thought it would be, and so I felt that I was at a loss, and so I started looking for other ways to experiment with my black and white work, which was the beginning, in a sense, of building an archive, a pretty, I don't know by what standard you'd call it large or not large. It was large enough, it's what I had. I started adding things and subtracting things that seemed to want to be added or subtracted. And there was no color at this point because none of the computing products available could allow you to work in color to any great extent. I mean, they'd be very basic colors, not the 16 million or 16.8 million colors that became the standard later, not that far after that. But I started in a very sort of gingerly fashion to take chances on adding content, whether it was changing out the wallpaper or changing what was reflected in the mirror or taking the maybe not so great image that was hanging on the wall and making it into something else. I mean, they were really pretty baby steps.
But still quite, you were doing something very different and very new, and a lot of people probably didn't approve of what you were doing.
Well,
and calling it art.
Yeah, they didn't approve, but I also didn't really think of myself as doing, I kind of bought the argument against it.
You bought it against it.
I mean, I felt like I was getting away with something.
Yeah.
And,
but you were creating an artwork, like I think of your photographs as artworks, not just photographs, because you've made them
No, but this is part of the thing about. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, you go ahead.
I didn't know, quite what I wanted to do, and so I experimented a lot. But in those days, when I went to graduate school, the first course I signed up for was photography. because I thought I would embarrass myself less by by using a camera and not a ruling pen. I don't know if any of you have used an old-style ruling pen, not a rapidograph or something, but it's challenging.
Yeah.
It's challenging to do a perfect 9-square grid, with the corners just absolutely crisp. And so I was happy to have a way of expressing myself to begin with, but also this was part of the coursework. They wanted you to know everything about all the photographic. I was a graduate student in graphic design. I hadn't had 4 years of art school. I was a history major in college. But I did have art in my background. As a child, I loved to draw and paint, and I got a lot of encouragement from my mother. And once I was out of elementary school and in high school, art was no longer available to me. I went away to school, and so I was a boarder, and you weren't allowed to take art unless your grade average was, I don't remember what it was, but mine wasn't high enough. And so I couldn't take art courses in high school. So that was 4 years of that. And then in college, I took 2 art courses, and I wanted to, I thought that, well, the way I thought of it was, what are the courses you have enjoyed the most in the last, since you've been here? And it was drawing and sculpture.
Well, Jeffrey, we've got a lot of slides to get through. I'd love to start
sure.
talking about those. And by the way, if you have questions as we go along, raise your hands or shout out, and we will try to get your questions as we go. This is the first one, called Looking West. And you had this printed out in California. Why did you have it printed out there?
The reason why I wasn't able to work on pictures in color is because the computers, the desktop computers, were not powerful enough to handle that kind of load, and that translated into, also there were no printers that could print. My first printer was an Apple Image Writer, which is a daisy wheel printer. Anybody ever use an Apple Image Writer? It's a pretty horrible printer. Very low very unsaturated, low contrast, and on very thin sheets of paper that are, it's an impact printer. But anyway, a lousy printer, best forgotten and never mentioned again.
By the way, how big are these photographs?
Well, they're all over the place. I mean, I try to make them so that they can withstand a lot of enlargement, if possible. Mm-hmm. I haven't played with the current thing that Photoshop has, which is a new way of working on increasing the resolution of
Was this one an image that you put together, or was this a real scene that you just took?
It's a real scene that I took, and there was one part of it with which I was pretty unhappy, because on the right side, where the boats are and the lawn ends, it was just a road going by the church, and
so you took it out.
So we're standing behind the sanctuary in the graveyard. Mm-hmm. Looking out, and I just thought that road was not what I wanted to have there, so I decided that's a view of Stonington taken from, pretty far up off the water, and the actual sky is gouache. It's been painted on paper, and
You painted that?
Yes.
And then took a photo of it?
I used to borrow occasionally from my ex-wife and my children, especially my daughter, who was always taping things down and then painting over it and taping more things down. So I used some of her creations in my, but this one, I just wanted to keep it quiet, and because it seemed, I loved what I had, but I wanted more.
That's great. I'm going to go to the next one. This is called Donde Está Noah? You went to Brazil.
Yeah, I went for my stepdaughter's wedding in Brazil, and after the wedding, we traveled to Iguazu Falls. It's a huge system of waterfalls in southern Brazil. Right. Actually, the river is the border between Argentina and Brazil. And what I wanted out of this, other than to survive, getting to Brazil and back. I'm an introvert, by the way, just in case it wasn't obvious before. And what I wanted from Iguazu Falls was water in every state conceivable. And so I went, I went down with my stepchildren, who were all taking pictures like mad, and because they're really, it's such a big system of waterfalls that a lot of it is just mist, and a lot of it is falling water, and a lot of it is swirling vortexes of water, but it was all interesting, and so I took tons of pictures down there, and
is that a Maine moose?
And were there any moose?
Is that a Maine moose?
That's a caribou, I think. I'm not sure. If anyone can tell me what that is, or what this is,
does anyone
let
know?
me know. But
water is a lot in you use water a lot in your photographs. Is it because it's beautiful and frightening? Is it because it brings up some kind of emotion for you?
It's a lot of
fear.
It's symbolic of so many aspects of our lives.
Right.
My mother kicked me out in a sailboat when I was, 8 years old, and so I was scared of windy days, but I've always had a lot of respect for the water and like being around it, and. But by the time we went to Brazil, I was beginning to see other things in the water than just sort of how I felt about it. And there are all kinds of ways I feel about it, so it's kind of it's kind of hard to explain, but in our culture, we've been talking a lot about water. And being where it shouldn't be.
Right. Now, especially.
And obviously, we don't want it in our. Let's just say that there are juxtapositions you have seen if you've been sitting here watching the slideshow when you came in. Water is just a fascination, I guess, and. So what I'm going to move on so we can talk about it when we see the images that you've made of it. That's true. Okay.
It's really, okay, here's another one. This is called Baker's Bed. Are you making a pun like Baker's Bread? It's Baker's Bed?
No. The name of the family that owned this house was named Baker.
Oh, okay.
And one of...
well, so what?
Yeah, I know. There's a lot of symbolism, both personal and archetypal, in my work.
No kidding. I wondered if beds also appear a lot in your work. Maybe dreams or nightmares or relationships.
Chairs, bureaus, you name it. I'm there. Especially doorways. Love those doorways. You've got to, passing through.
Passing through.
We use, I mean, a doorway is a metaphor for so many things that,
Yep.
you know, I would call that one of the archetypal symbols, you know, whereas the
What
moment
about the cloud over the bed?
Yeah, well, somebody made me a member of the Cloud Society a few years back. There is something called the Cloud Society. And this was one of the clouds of the day. For a while, they did clouds daily, and then they did them weekly. And now, if you're lucky, if you get one cloud a month. But this was a perfect little fair weather cloud, and what I did to it was turn it into a little rain cloud. But one of I was very friendly with this family, and still am. And their house was very spare, and they had, I think they have about 8 kids. And, but everything was dead simple in that house, and that's one of the things I liked about it. But they had to sell the house that was coming up. It was on the market. They were getting rid of it. And also, my best friend in that family turned out to have very early dementia. And he was going downhill fast. And so one of the sisters said, you know, we'd love for you to go through the house and take pictures, and whatever you come out with, it's fine with us. It's all right. You know, we don't. We just want something to remember the house by. And so this is sort of a combination of what those rooms looked like. I wanted them to be satisfied. You know, this wasn't like a paying job. This was you know, doing something for friends. And so, but I also loved, I can't know if you can see it, if in a really good high resolution up close picture, you can see there's a lot of detail on that bedspread. It's just a beautiful combination of flowers and colors. And but I was thinking of this as TJ's bed. So
Your friend.
Yeah, my friend.
The cloud over the bed, that just seems like a symbol.
Well,
Yeah.
It was.
Were you thinking that way?
It was yeah. It was. Some of these things, you know, are brought in or used purely for their formal or visual components, that they're the right texture, they're the right color, they're, you know, they're what seems to complete the picture. And when the cloud came in, I felt like I was done, because when I decided to do that, because I just saw it as sadness for TJ.
Right.
And,
well, I think that's what it feels.
And that the whole family would understand immediately, you know, what I was getting at, and because I didn't want to, you know, you run a risk when you're asked to do something like that of getting it wrong and putting things in the picture that are going to be the right word is not coming. I didn't want them to feel torn apart by this as a you know, a gritty. I wanted it to have a dreamlike quality that this you know, I doubt that PJ would recognize, you know, the picture or the house.
Right.
It's just one of those tragedies of what happens sometimes.
But it's a beautiful photograph. You made a work of art of it. This one's called Be Still, and your friend William Irving, who is an artist who many of you probably know, said, "Such is the tranquility of these images that we do not seem too concerned. As in a dream, we accept the altered reality, like the trees coming in through the house. The inside is on the outside."
Yeah, the trees The first thing my dealer said when she saw this picture, this is a dealer I'm no longer with, she said, "What's that about?" She pointed to the trees and she said, and she was complaining about other things. I had other pictures that were very saturated reds. It was the hull of a Canadian icebreaker that was, run ashore somewhere, and this beautiful decaying surface of this steel vessel, and she looked at that and she said, well, I like everything but the red ones. So I said, okay, but she said, but what's that? Pointing to the trees, and I said,
that's my work.
They're trees.
Yeah.
Don't they? I was hoping they looked like trees.
It's you go between reality and illusion, sort of like Rene Magritte or somebody surrealist.
Yeah, I've been compared to Magritte quite a bit.
Yeah, some of this work reminds me of some of his very. He had a different view of a lot of things, and he wasn't afraid to make fun of things in a funny way.
Right.
Yeah, he had a good sense of humor.
Yeah, and I think that probably, given the way the art world was working in France, at the time, the salons where one wasn't invited, or
I'm sure he wasn't accepted.
The Salon des Refuses,
yeah.
Where the Impressionists hung basically their first show. Magritte, while I enjoy Magritte, and if I think of influences on me, I wouldn't go to Magritte.
Who would you say?
I wouldn't go to the surrealistic aspect of it so much as I would say if you crossed Hopper and Wyeth, Andrew Wyeth,
interesting.
you'd get sort of where I'm coming from more.
Hopper because of the desolation and the and
the
Wyeth because of
the emptiness.
Yeah.
And the strength. I mean, how powerful those images are. I remember the one, the house by the railroad, where the top half, it's an old Victorian with all kinds of gingerbread stuff, but the railroad grade sort of slashes across the picture and cuts off the bottom part of that house. And
the ones down in Truro where they're standing right by the water. The woman
and
looking
rooms
at
by
the
the sea. I mean, that's another Hopper that is a kind of a. I think it's known for having for that. I mean, if I've copied anybody, in a sense, I would say that concept of looking through, looking at the bright sunlight that splashes on those walls, and then the ocean, an open door, no yard, just
the ocean coming up to the door. With yours, they come right into the room. The ocean comes into the room.
Right. And
you pushed it a little further.
It took me a while to get it to do that.
Well, here's one. This is called Mackerel Sky. And at first I looked at it and I thought, oh, it's so beautiful. Whose room is that? Is that somebody you know?
Yeah, it's a house in Blue Hill that faces north. It's called Sunset Cliff.
Well, you made it look really, I love the water coming up to the table.
Well,
at first you look at it and you think, oh, it's a really nice room. And then you realize there's water coming right up to the edge of the bottom of the table. And there's clouds in the ceiling.
You pass the seat of the chairs. You can't sit
You can't sit.
You can't sit in those chairs without
It's up to the apron of the
wet.
table. You're going to be floating at the table.
It was the sky, of course, that made me think Mackerel Sky, but also, people talk about how, or meteorologists talk about how mackerel skies are, an indication of changing weather. So I was thinking of it in that regard as well. We've got the, and you can't really, I don't know if you can see it here, but there out the door, I've basically taken what was the view from the middle of Mistake Harbor off of between Great Wass and Head Harbor, Steel Harbor Island up by Jonesport.
Yeah.
And it's also, a lot of those islands are actually sanctuaries for the fauna and flora. Well, I don't think so much fauna, for flora. But by the time I got to make this picture, by the way, these pictures are kind of, they're in the order I sent them in, but I was, I didn't have everything just where I wanted it, and some of them are sort of strangely placed in the order of things. But this, bringing the water up so high in this room, when I had never done anything like that before, just felt like the right thing to do.
Wow, it's amazing. You're so immaculate the way you do it. You really believe that's what it was. Like, it looks real. Yeah. I'm going to keep moving because we got so many to go through, and I don't want to miss any. This is called Looking South. Kind of frightening. It looks like it's right on the verge of falling into the sea to me.
Yeah, it's what I was thinking of. This is Gretna Campbell's studio. Gretna Campbell's a painter.
Yeah.
Was a painter. She died, I think, about 10 years ago. But this was her studio on Little Cranberry Island, and the family was trying to get someone to write something, I think, about Gretna's work, or they were looking for visuals. So the director of the courthouse gallery asked me if I would be willing to go out there and see if I could find anything interesting about
God.
it. So I went out there, and it, it's kind of an empty studio full of things that are covered with dust and 1,000 paint tubes that are hard as a rock.
It seems like you also have deterioration, decay, that's another theme in your work. You seem to concentrate on that. I'm going to go to the next one because this is called Crossing Over. It's quite frightening, especially nowadays with all these refugees. That's what I thought of when I saw it.
Yeah. Well, it is kind of meant to be an uncomfortable picture, and anyone who's gone anywhere in an overloaded rowboat, where the freeboard is only, so much, is, and there, I can see it over there. So if I look, I'll stop turning around. I was given a painting, a very small painting about this big by a friend, who said he said his aunt had done it. But I found it a very interesting painting because it looked like it was an overloaded boat full of people. But it was in a very flat ocean with a very pale sort of looming mountain in the distance. And I thought, well, this almost gets, to where I would want it to be. So I decided I'd do it photographically. And so basically the way I see this picture is, it's the story of life,
Yeah.
It's the story of our lives. It's where we're all on an ocean that can change its mood at any second and turn everything upside down.
Yeah.
And sometimes I did this picture long before anybody was, setting foot in a inflatable in Tripoli trying to get across to Italy and crossing the Mediterranean, but and in fact, to be honest with you, I hadn't really thought about that. I'm seeing it right now, how plainly it's a tiny boat. It's not 100 people in an inflatable, but it makes the same point, which is that, there are journeys in life that have to be made. You wouldn't make them if you didn't have to. And sometimes it doesn't even need to be in a boat. This is just this is one of those symbolic
Symbols,
moments.
yeah.
And there's nowhere, there's nowhere anywhere near that if that boat was to capsize, you're just up the creek
Perish.
or in the bay.
Talk about this one a little bit. This one also is another beautiful scene, but then you look at it and you think, well, there are eggs in that nest. Is the bird going to eat them, or is that the bird going to sit on them? We don't know. And you've got the stone wall is really clams or mussels.
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 Mussels that are too big to be mussels, but one of the great things about working in Photoshop the way I have is that it's a great engine for creating texture and detail, and I just fell in love with that aspect of it. In the case of the bird and the eggs, the bird is supposed to be a blackbird, not a crow. It may be my lack of Audubon's of knowledge about exactly what makes one bird look different than another, but that's a blackbird, and those are blackbird eggs. But it still doesn't matter. I mean, it's it could be any, it could be a bird that's about to eat those eggs. It could be a bird that's going to sit on them. Ambiguity is such a wonderful tool for an artist to be able to employ to draw a viewer in. Instead of, obviously, it's an old cliche, but you don't want pictures to be totally static and that you feel like that this is just what the artist intended, was for this to be a beautiful scene of, I think what I try to do is I try to create a tension between what's beautiful, because beauty is really important to me. I mean, I'm really dedicated to the proposition that we need to put as much beauty in the world as we can without making it, like treacle or, making it too sweet or too
Well,
pat or
ambiguity
predictable.
holds your interest and draws you in, actually, I think.
That's a good,
Yeah.
I used to use the phrase, I want to take the viewer in, I used to say.
That's good. All right, this is called Nana is Gone. Is she dead?
Oh, yes, she is. She was dead then, and she's... that was my grandmother, my maternal grandmother's bedroom. She was gone, and they were taking the house apart, and I've got a couple of other pictures from that room.
Well, speaking of ambiguity, you said, I'm careful not to lead anyone too far down any given path. It's not satisfying emotionally to have the questions answered for you. Very interesting.
Yeah.
So you want people to look at this and think, what does he mean by that? Or what's he intending me to feel? And so I'd love to know, for instance, does anyone want to say what they feel about this painting? Knowing that the title is Nana is Gone.
Electrolux was her favorite brand of vacuum cleaner.
But we'll go to the next one because there are so many interesting photographs here that have real questions and ambiguity. This one is called Flora Borealis.
Just kind of a made-up.
Well, you said at one time you can zoom in and out you can inhabit the picture at the pixel level, where you can be either lost or you can be found. That means that you can go abstract or you can see the shapes, or what did you mean?
One of the artists off one of your other talks that I was looking at the other day said something about inhabiting the picture. It might have been, I don't know if it was Charlie Hewitt or who it was, but in any case, he was talking, whoever it was talking about feeling like, that they can be in the picture. And just as a matter of the way you work, I work in Photoshop, is I'm constantly zooming in and out and in and out. And I do begin to feel after a while like this is this is my world. This is my world for now. And I once I get to the point where the pixels look like big squares, I'm kind of done with that aspect of it. And I would be launching into a more abstract way of dealing with it.
It was Charlie Hewitt who said that. He said he was part of the picture. That was how he immersed himself.
Right, exactly, That he was saying, this is like, I'm part of it. And I do feel the same way. Like I inhabit these pictures, and sometimes they're like this one. That assignment of going into a Gretna's studio it was not easy to get something out of there. One of the things that I loved about it, I don't know if you can see it.
Want me to go back?
No, it's all right. It's the newel. That's a newel post at the bottom of the stairs. The studio is 2 stories, and
oh, that was her studio?
That's her studio.
Oh, because there's another one with that newel post coming up.
It's still her studio.
Yeah, right.
But it had smudges of paint from
where
everybody coming and going had put their hands on the newel post.
Well,
and
probably
to me,
Gretna had been putting her, because after painting
it just
all the...
became symbolic to me of everything. I did have a very brief history with Gretna. I didn't really know her, and I didn't know her work, but she had just showed up at Yale to teach painting when I was just starting out in the graphic design department. And I wanted to learn more about painting, and I asked her about if she could. I brought her the 2 or 3 paintings I had made, and I said, would you be willing to critique painting if I brought it to you? And she said yes. And a couple of months later, we decided that we were both too busy to do it, which was too bad. It would have been a great thing.
She'd love to know that you photographed her house.
Yeah, I just wonder whether she'd
Maybe
try
she
to
knows.
rip my head off or give me a hug.
Well, we are not, we're at 8 o'clock, but since we are going to have questions during this show, I'm going to keep going till 8:30, but be sure and ask questions if you have them, okay? Yes?
Yeah, maybe in one of them you could just sort of take us around the work and tell us which parts are painted?
Take you around the work and tell us which parts are painted and which are photographs and how you put them together. Is that what you mean, Rosie?
Yeah, I'd be intrigued to
Okay.
that's
Let me go to the next one. This is called The Keeper's House. Now, how did you put this one together?
Well, it started with a photograph of the upstairs hallway of this house. And it was it was a project that my mother had taken on. There was a derelict farmhouse on the dump road in Blue Hill that she bought for almost nothing, but she wanted to fix up. And so she spent a lot of time doing that. And I don't know if you look at the wallpaper up close, it's like 18th century scenes of gentlemen and ladies getting in and out of carriages and so forth and so on. And that's the wallpaper she chose to put in there. I've always wanted to go into the keepers' houses at lighthouses, but somehow I've never made it into one. And
Well, you wouldn't want to go in that one.
no, and that one is, and of course, a lot of those, are a lot of keepers' houses are pretty close to the edge of the ocean, and you can see in that one that there is there's a blowing curtain in the far room, and that the bed is disassembled. And then there's that little model that's a Pawn Yacht on the top of the bureau. I was not really sure if I had an idea of what I wanted out of this picture. But I got it anyway.
But you put the water on the floor. I mean, that's what really makes it.
Yeah, no, it's true.
And the pebbles and all of the stones. I mean, how do you do that? Is that what you're asking, Rosie? How do you get that in there?
And also you mentioned that you use bits of your daughter's paintings, and I was just curious to know in some of them, which parts are
The original photograph.
photographed paintings and which are, this one, it looks to me like it's a collage of photographs.
Well, it is, and
It always is, I guess.
Can everyone hear what she's saying? Well, she's asking about
yes.
how he puts together and what makes up this picture is what is the photograph, the original photograph, and then what has he added? And how do you add it?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, and I should have repeated your question because it is easier for us to try to remind me to repeat.
Okay.
But obviously the water and the rocks and that has been essentially what I did is I masked off the floor. Basically, there's a little line, you can snap like a, and so I had everything but the floor is what was actually in that picture, and what I put in the floor was another one of those. It was another one of those moments where it felt like the right thing to do. It did not feel like I should try to add a very elegant Oriental rug, or anything else. It just felt to me like, and it couldn't just be water. Like, for instance, the dining room was, where it was just almost flat. It's, where this is, it shows, and, you think we're pretty much know we have to be on the second story of this house, although you may not be thinking that to yourself. But the water's up there anyway. I mean, that's a stair railing for sure.
Right. Yeah,
in the
no, you do know
foreground.
you're on the second floor, and then all that
Yeah.
junk that has come up it's got to come up with a big wave.
So a lot of this, is things that don't make sense. That's why they're surreal. They don't exactly make sense. You're not sure why they're there. I don't really want you to worry about or try to understand what I had in mind. I really want you to see how you feel about this, whether you are moved by this, whether you have a political point of view about this. Aha, it's climate change, and he's showing us that if we don't do something soon, I think that that's true to some extent, that is what I'm doing, because that's what's on my mind. I live right by the water, and I live on an island, and everybody's always really aware. There's nobody around who doesn't know whether the tide's coming or going.
We have another question over here.
Okay.
How do you archive 1,000,000 subjects so that you can pull back that water with those rocks?
How do you archive 1,000,000 subjects so you can pull back that?
How do you know where to find
How do you know where to find those images that you want?
It's a pretty inefficient method. I go back and forth through screen after screen after screen of the pictures I think more of myself now as not someone who composes pictures. Mostly these days I use my iPhone because I always have it with me, and it's a pretty decent rendering.
It is.
And it's really, the best camera is the one you have with you. And
You label them by a date, bunch of rocks and water, and then a date, Nana's house, and then you can find what you're looking for.
You'd like him to do that. She wonders if he dates his photographs.
no, I think
Yeah.
One of the ways in which the creative juices are coaxed, into action is by going through these reams and reams and reams of things that I've seen before, and all the new things. I mean, it's another good thing about the iPhone is that if you're, the commitment you have to make to take a picture is very minimal.
Yeah, right. No, it's true.
Is that picture?
What?
What I would like to see is that picture somehow appearing on Zillow. Like, you go to look in houses,
Oh, Emily would like to see how this looks on Zillow.
Oh, yeah.
It's like, well, here's the upstairs.
Wait till you see the third floor.
Yeah, right. Oh, that is so funny. Okay, this one, now this is a sense of humor, because this is called Body of Water. You were
Yeah.
just having fun.
My father was a punster in a lot of ways, and it keeps coming back to haunt me. But also, this is a lot like the second picture or so, the one that was called Donde Está Noah. I loved this. This was a mounted head, but I loved something about it, and I just wanted. In the first one that you saw tonight, that was, this creature, what appeared to be on the wrong side of a waterfall, where we're struggling to keep its head above water, and also there's the moon in that, and it's the middle of the night, but also you've got the living room curtains hanging there.
Makes no sense. Yeah.
By the side of it, and so you have to rely a lot on your sense of what makes a good picture, why it's interesting.
Well, Peter, how do you say his name? Plagans, of the Wall Street Journal said, Becton uses a large flat screen monitor to feel his way into a picture. He has no preconceived idea of where he's going, no formalist philosophy of composing and editing, and no conscious iconographic code. Is that true?
Pretty much, yeah. I mean,
you make them up as you go along. You're very intuitive about this whole thing.
Yeah, it's part of the leap of faith, that you make when you work as an artist. Mm-hmm. That somehow you're going to find the way mm-hmm. to make it work.
Even if it doesn't make sense, that's what I like.
Yeah,
I mean,
and it not making sense is also a very important part of the process.
Yeah.
So, and I think that's kind of what Magritte had in mind,
Okay, this is called Black Cloud. Woo-hoo-hoo.
Yeah, this one I have. This is based on on a number of things, but one of them is it's a model. It's a model of a Nova Scotia type lobster boat.
I thought you were going to say it's based on fear.
No. Well, it's what
It's a wheelhouse with no wheel.
What the lobsterman calls Novi boats.
Novi?
Novies.
Novi.
Yeah, it's a Novi, and walking out of the studio one evening, it was right after a thunderstorm had been making lots of noise, and I'm always having to, unplug things and make sure that everything's protected. But I went outside and I saw this cloud hanging there, and I thought, boy, that's a great cloud. So I whipped out the iPhone and started taking pictures of it. And it's really hard to get good pictures of boats at sea where the sea really looks
Angry.
frightening and threatening. And so I decided that I would do my best with this model. And so it was a combination of Iguazu Falls and the picture outside my studio of this retreating thundercloud, and really just this sense of trying to get a sense of what it feels like to be tossed around like that. I didn't put any people. I could have put someone in that boat, but I just thought, it makes just as much sense not to have someone.
Well, they already slid off the boat. That's what I was thinking.
Well, it's a very sad thing.
Yeah.
I mean, a Deer Isle being a pretty full-on fishing community, Stonington being probably more lobster brought into Stonington than any other place in the world. But every once in a while, a lobsterman doesn't notice that he's got put his foot in a coil of rope, and
Pulls him overboard.
by the time he realizes what's happened, he's halfway over the side, and you don't even have time to reach for the throttle for the gear shift. It's just kind of like boom, and it doesn't matter how many bones get broken. That line wants to go out, and it's got maybe a two traps on a set of two, and if Noah has their way about the right whales, they might have 3 or 4 traps attached to a trap line. But it presents a tremendous amount of resistance, so it's no joke to have a loop of line around your foot and be pulled off a boat. If that doesn't kill you, you're likely to be unconscious by the time you hit the water. So I don't know, this is what comes from being around boats and thinking about water. It's just all there.
Oh, another question
We're
here.
looking at this on a movie theater size screen, could be Jaws, could be, any of the horrible water movies, and you get the terror. But when you look back, you're looking at a very small version of it, and it doesn't give you the emotion that one does. But you never told us the sizes.
What are the sizes of your like, what's the size of this?
That print goes anywhere from, this big by that big,
By the way, Jeffrey shows his work at the Courthouse Gallery up in Ellsworth.
Ellsworth.
And he's having a show this September. If you want to see some of the images, that's where to go.
And that's just about sizes, because it's not I'm not using given sheet of photographic paper. I'm using you can make it's kind of hard to talk to prospective buyers about additions and sizes, and because you can make it any size.
Can you really? How big can you make it?
Well, I mean, I don't know how that new aspect of Photoshop, how good that is.
Right.
But it might increase it, by half again if it was.
What's the biggest you can make now?
Well, my printer is 44 inches by 44 inches wide by however long the piece of paper is.
That's big, yeah.
So I do have one of the ones that was another wild, crazy, Novi at sea picture that was in that group that was showing while people were coming in. What was I going to say?
Was how big?
Oh, that picture. Yeah, that picture is at its largest. I think it's 23 inches high by 130 inches long.
Wow, that is big.
Because I can only, I'm always limited by that one dimension. I could buy a bigger printer that was 66 by, however.
How many paintings, or how many photographs will you have in the show this summer? Or in September, I mean.
Probably not more than 5 or 6.
Will they be big, or they'll be every size?
Well,
sizes.
Karen likes to have them medium size.
Medium, okay.
Because she doesn't like having them too big to hang, and she doesn't,
You can probably sell them better. If they,
I think that medium probably sells better than huge.
now
I mean,
this
there
one
is.
is
I
called.
mean, we figured on one of these that we could take the metal comes in 4x8 sheets, and so you could do a triptych of 8 feet high by 12 feet long.
It's big.
So that's about as I haven't done one that size, but it's theoretically possible. And I think like a lot of artists, I like to see my work big.
Okay, this is called Winter Island. Is that a truck full of lobster traps or what?
No, it's just an 18.
Eight-wheeler.
I mean, what do they call it? They call them wheelers. I don't know anybody
8-wheeler?
knows.
18-wheeler?
And that's the causeway between Little Deer Isle and Deer Isle, and it's a wash at high tide. This was one of those where you're saying to yourself, "Isn't it a little ridiculous to have a horizontal that long?" And I was very pleased to see that one of your other artists had some kind of crazy long picture.
Hey, you're the one who said,
But
anything goes. I think it's great.
That's what it's like to follow a big truck across the Deer Isle Causeway in the middle of the winter. And also, once again, it's very hard to get water to render in a way that makes it look impressive. You take a picture of it, and it always looks like it's these little ripples.
You're right. You're right.
And so, once again, I had to employ Iguazu Falls to the rescue.
So
And
this
you
is-
can see that these aren't even necessarily in the shape of waves. They just give the
It
impression.
looks like it's roiling.
They give the impression of waves, because what I'm looking for this is the feeling that you get, that this is one of those days when even being out on the road is something you shouldn't be doing, and
Risky.
much less out on the water.
Yeah.
So
Anybody got a comment here? I don't want to neglect you. Shout out if I don't see your hand, okay? This is called
you shouldn't feel shy, because there really isn't any kind of question
this one.
you can
Somebody's
ask.
going to have a question about this one. This is called Wake Up. I said in a hurry.
Yeah, it had an earlier title, which was WTF, which I will not translate for you. That was the working title. And one of the
I
reasons.
think you should leave it WTF. That is really funny.
Maybe I should have left it.
Yeah,
WTF.
I think it really it's worthy of it.
I'm beginning to to think that way. But
Yeah.
Part of what I did in this picture, I did because I went to see a gallerist in San Francisco, and she had more questions about. She was just said, this is, I like these pictures, but this. She says, really, this green, really? And I'm like, yeah, what's wrong with that green? And it's like, or she said, but this is so Maine, and this, and
Yeah.
And I'm so, well, yeah, they're Maine, but it's not, you know, this is not all about Maine.
It's about emotional reactions to
yeah,
things.
exactly.
Yeah,
It is. I mean,
Yeah.
and I think we all know, you know, that looking at a picture that moves you
Yeah.
is an experience we're looking for,
Right.
not a picture. I mean, not an experience that is neither here nor there.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing about her was that, you know, she said, you know, it's a pretty high-end San Francisco gallery, so I wasn't sure whether they'd be interested anyway. I mean, but she'd ended up, I left 4 prints with her. She ended up selling one of them. You could just tell from the way she was talking that you know, West Coast artists are West Coast artists, and you know, she had a problem with.
She has a problem.
She had a problem with it, and so that one of so what I explained I posted this on Instagram like a few days ago, and one of the things I said about it was. The room is courtesy of Gretna Campbell's studio on Great Cranberry Island in Maine, and the breaking wave is courtesy of Fort Point, which is almost directly underneath the Golden Gate Bridge.
Oh, I love it. That is great. That's a good story. Huh. And that is the inside of Gretna Campbell's. Wow.
Yeah, but I mean,
love that green.
10 years after she died.
I know, but even so, I mean, wow.
And even so, there are a bunch of canvases around.
There they are, under the window.
And because she was teaching at Yale, all those little pictures that are, they all apparently, they say, property of the Yale Gallery of Art.
Oh, geez. Wow. The extension of the gallery at Yale.
In a smaller picture, you can actually read all the titles of all the books on the shelf. You know, resolution is something that for photographers, there are one of the battles I've had to fight, going from being a straight black and white photographer, really majoring in portraiture. You know, to working this way is, I gotta think for a second.
Going from a straight portrait photographer to working with emotional, you mean emotional stuff?
It is.
Resolution.
Thank you.
That's Hillary,
Thank you, yes.
Jeffrey's wife.
Resolution. She complained about one of my favorite pictures, saying that she didn't think the waves in it were, you know, like high enough res.
Oh.
But you know, this is one of the problems I've had with the photography world, is that it worships at the temple of photography.
Oh, I see what you mean.
And photography is, you know, inside the circled wagons.
Right.
Is where photography is living. I mean, you can all take issue with this.
Yeah.
But
you're into emotions as well as photography, and you've really broken boundaries.
I mean, I just use photography as a tool, not
to make a painting.
Not you know, like some people used to do that. They want to make sure that people understood that they had not cropped this photograph.
I know.
So they leave a black line where the paper is fully exposed around it, to say, I am not one of those people who cheats by cropping their pictures.
Yeah.
And but you know, and I have to say that. A couple of things, one of which was it has been, from my point of view, it has been a struggle, a battle to talk to people about digital without it being all about digital, or all about how it's not film photography, or and one of the, you know, in the early days, people would say to me, you know, why, you know, digital will never be as high a quality as film is, and digital prints will never be of the subtlety and clarity of silver, gelatin silver prints, or another one. Trying to think of the technique that you use to make color, the most permanent kind of color.
I don't know.
Well, no, not Cibachrome, or it's no, not dye sub either. Although dye sublimation is back in a big way.
But yeah, it's like every art form that is popular, then you go to the next form and people say, oh, no, you can't go there. And, you know, it's like I'm reading about Keith Haring right now. He went through so much trouble trying to be a pop artist because people said, that's not real art. And yet, you know, he's...
Well, yeah, that brings
same
back
kind of thing.
Why, you know, why do I live in Maine? And I mean, what I did is I I did not want to be. I had been given, I had been given advice. Just happens to have been from Robert Motherwell.
Whoa!
I've been given advice that if you want to make it in the art world, you go to Soho. You gather friends around you, and you slowly become. And so I went to Maine and locked myself away, and I'm paying the price. I have not got a presence in New York.
Here's Gretna's Newell post again. Look at the paint on it. Did you add those stairs? Those don't look real.
No, they don't.
Well, those stairs are added.
Yeah, because look at the shadow behind them.
But there's also there were real stairs there, but they were so problematic that I decided that I was going to put something else there. So
I'm going to move on just so we can get to these last few. Oh, this is called October Tide. Ooh, scary looking. I want to go to the middle passage so you can talk about that, because I know you want to talk about it.
Yeah, and October Tide, I haven't got a lot to say about, except that it is, it's a good example of being able to make a picture look like a real photograph that really is just completely made up of spare parts.
Spare parts.
And I like it.
I'll go back and show it to you, because those rocks and all, you couldn't keep a boat there without it going totally smashing, right? I mean, it looks like it's being pulled right down into the rocks.
It's too close to the rocks, but also I've exaggerated certain aspects of it that's the only way to get a wave to look like a wave is by actually just stretching it this way, pulling it up.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I pulled up.
Pulled up in the photograph. In Photoshop, you can do that.
Yeah, I just you have to know when. You have to know when it's right and when it's not.
Yeah.
And
that's the
name
talent.
of the game.
That's the talent that you have. Now this one is called The Middle Passage.
This is work from a year ago, this last winter. So our first COVID, only halfway through the winter did we get COVID, but it's from that half of the winter. But it also had to do with a lot of the political discourse going on at the time, and Black Lives Matter, and reparations, the possibility of reparations for, but also in my life, it wasn't until relatively recently that I realized my father's family was from North Carolina, and my mother's family was from Massachusetts, and I pretty aware that there are a lot of black folks named Becton. They got that name by having been owned by a Becton at some point in their lives. And, not something that obviously that I feel very good about. It just, the whole issue of political correctness and of who gets to own, whatever the territory of the moment is that is the oppressed and who is the oppressor. So I felt the need to do something that I could, live with, that would express some of my understanding of how the human tragedy that was involved in people being basically kidnapped from the interior of the African continent and brought to the coast and then packed, chained to the deck of a boat and sailed, 30 days without being able to get up to go to the bathroom. So how does an old white guy who suspects his family owned slaves in the past, how do you deal with that? And I don't know, in this picture, I can see it. It might just look like stuff because this face is taken off a sculpture by a sculptor named Mark Kinchy. Does great work. But I thought that the face had just the right sort of ambiguity about its ethnicity. So to me, it worked, and the ripples that go across this picture are actually ripples of water running down the deck of the boat.
Oh.
That I took pictures of, and they seem to fit. They almost look like tattoos on the skin, and so this, for what it's worth, of my attempt at relating to the horrible passage that those folks had to endure to get from the Bight of Benin on the west side coast of Africa to whether it was whether it was Brazil or the Caribbean or South Carolina or New Orleans or wherever they were landed and sold. I have a series. I didn't put them all in this. Another one is called 35 Days at Sea, which is, sort of an idea of what the price the body pays for being chained to a deck for 35 days. Not a great way to start your new life. But,
No.
But in any case, for me, this picture works on a number of levels. And what you see in the background, the things that I started to mention, there is actually the mast of a ship of about the same size as a slaver would have been. They weren't big boats.
Oh.
130 to maybe 150 feet. But, and so I have another model. It's a model of a vessel about that size. And so I put its rigging on one side and on the other side. I forget what I can't tell from the picture.
Well, we're going to have to end it there because it's a little after 8:30. It's been very interesting, Jeffrey, talking to you.
Time sure
wonderful
flies when
work.
you're having fun, folks.
Oh, really? It's been a wonderful talk. Thank you so much.